Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be going through the Configuring Adaptive Threat Profiling Part 1 Learning Byte. Let's first talk about the two different major networks. We have the data center network and the branch network. And in the branch, we have devices that are connected to EX1, and then SRX2 acts as the perimeter firewall. And then we have VSRX1, which connects into EX1. And then let's look at the data center. We have SRX3, which is the perimeter firewall for the data center. And then we have the ATP cloud, which is out there on the internet as well. And so, the criteria for this example. We have EX1, which is configured for port mirroring, and it's mirroring traffic from the branch devices to VSRX1. And that's already configured and set up. If you're curious about that, I have another Learning Byte that I did that focuses on how to configure port mirroring for an EX or QFX device. And so go check that out if you want to find out about the configuration for that. Okay, so VSRX1, it's already set up in tap mode. And just like with the port mirroring stuff, I created a Learning Byte that covers that and the configuration and verification. So if you're interested in that part of the configuration or that part of the subject of configuring adaptive threat profiling, go check out that Learning Byte. Okay, so what do we need to do? Well, first we need to create the cloud ATP feeds. We're going to create one feed, suspicious hosts for source addresses and bad internet nodes for destination addresses. And these are going to be adaptive threat profiling feeds, not just your regular cloud ATP feed. So keep that in mind. Then for enforcement, we are going to block enterprise hosts that use web proxy, web anonymizer, and Tor applications on SRX2. Now, one thing I didn't point out here is we will be monitoring traffic that is coming from the branch. That's going to work that way because VSRX1 is in tap mode and we're port mirroring all traffic from the branch over to VSRX1. And so with that being said, if something in the branch uses one of those applications, we're going to need to block hosts from the branch from communicating with anything on the internet. So we're going to kind of isolate them in that regards. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to block data center hosts that communicate with destinations for web proxy, web anonymizer, Tor applications on SRX3. And so basically what we're going to do there is anything in the branch that communicates with one of those applications, something on the internet with those applications, we're going to stop anything in the data center from communicating with those internet hosts because that could be some bad traffic. That could be some bot-related traffic. So we want to protect the rest of our network preemptively before they even have a chance to try to communicate with those potentially dangerous hosts on the internet. All right, so with that being said, let's jump to the ATP Cloud web interface and get this going. Here is the Cloud ATP web interface, and I'm already logged in here. Let's go to configuration mode and then go to adaptive threat profiling. And you'll see that there are no feeds that are available here, nothing configured. Let's click create and then configure the feed, and it's going to be suspicious hosts. And we don't need to add this to the infected host feed, so we're fine there. Now notice that the type field only shows the IP option, and that's the only option right now. There is some talk about adding some other criteria in the future, so we'll see what happens there. And then time to live is how long do we want this values or any dynamic address entries to remain in the feed. So the entries in the feed, how long? So we'll click OK. And then create a new feed. We'll call this bad internet nodes. And same thing, IP, 1 day for the time to live. And we don't need to add this to the infected host feeds. Okay, so we got both of those feeds set up. And now what happens? Well, what happens is the VSRX1, SRX2, and SRX3 devices are all a part of this domain. That is the ATP Cloud realm. And they need to download these feeds. They'll be empty. Notice how there's no items, and that's by design. We need to add stuff to it. But what needs to happen now is those hosts, or rather those SRX devices, need to download those feeds. And that's on a 5-minute timer. So I'm going to pause the video and wait for those feeds to properly download before we continue. All right, so here is our devices, VSRX1, SRX2, and SRX3. Okay, so let's focus on SRX1 for the moment, and let's make sure those feeds have downloaded properly. And great, we have both feeds. You can see here that we have the suspicious host feed and there's no objects. And we have the bad internet nodes feed. And there are also 0 objects there. And that's exactly what we expect. We shouldn't have any objects there because we haven't put any objects there yet. And so let's jump to VSRX2 and make sure with the feeds as well. And great, both feeds there. And VSRX3. And again, both feeds are there. So perfect. Let's go ahead and jump back to VSRX1. We need to first jump into configuration mode. Now, EX1 is sending traffic towards VSRX1. It is port mirroring traffic, that is. And so we don't need to configure that. I'll show you some of the configuration briefly, though. We see tap zone. This is a security zone that I created, has interface Gigi004. That's the interface that we are receiving traffic on. And then we can show the interface that is in promiscuous mode. And if we look at the security forwarding options, we can see that we do have tap mode enabled for that interface. Okay, great. We get that out of the way. Let's go to security policies, from zone tap to zone tap. This is because traffic will be coming in and out of the tap zone. See, we have no security policies configured. Let's configure one. Configure any source address as well as the destination address of any application. That's the layer 4 information. Now we can configure dynamic application. And what we want to configure there is we want to configure the Junos web proxy and also Junos web anonymizer and then Junos Tor. And then I'm going to configure one last thing because it's going to be kind of a little difficult for me to test these applications in a lab environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Junos Facebook access, and we can test it with accessing Facebook as well. And then we set the permit, security intelligence under application services. Then if I hit question mark here, we can see we have the add destination IP to feed and also add source IP to feed options. And so let's do the add source IP to feed suspicious nodes, or excuse me, suspicious hosts. Add destination IP to feed bad internet nodes. And so what's going to happen here is any traffic that is sent into that tap interface, which is in the tap zone, is going to match this policy if it is of dynamic application, web proxy group, web anonymizer group, Junos Tor, or Junos Facebook access. And so let's go ahead and commit that configuration. And then let's go ahead and jump to a host that can generate some traffic for us. All right, here is our host. Let's go ahead and open a web browser. And then let's just go to Facebook. That should generate the traffic for us. And we're presented with a login page. And so let's jump back to VSRX1. Okay, so here is VSRX1. Match on the dynamic application, Junos Facebook access. And great, we can see we have some traffic here. And so we have traffic coming into the policy and going out of the policy. That's great. So what should be happening now is we should be adding the 10.10.10.237 IP address to the suspicious host feed. And any destination IPs we see here, such as 157.240.18.19, is going to be added to the bad internet nodes feed. So let's go ahead and jump to the ATP Cloud web interface and have a look at those feeds. Okay, so here is the ATP Cloud web interface. We're still under Configure Adaptive Threat Profiling, and there's nothing yet, but let's go ahead and refresh the page. And that's okay. It takes a few minutes. The process to upload the feed is on a 5-minute timer. And so let's go ahead and pause the video, and I'll restart the video after the IPs are added to the feeds. All right, so I just refreshed that page again, and we do have items in those feeds. We can click on the individual feeds and see what's in here. And then the other feed, we can see the IP addresses that have shown up. So let's go ahead and jump back to the SRX devices and have a look at things there. Okay, so here is VSRX1. Let's check things out. And nothing yet. And that's okay, because it does take time to, after the feeds are uploaded, to repopulate those feeds back down to any of the devices that are part of the ATP realm. So I'm going to pause the video for a few minutes, and then I'll restart the video as soon as the contents of the feeds have been downloaded to the SRX devices. All right, so let's check those feeds again. And perfect, we have one object in the suspicious host feed, and we have 4 objects in the bad internet nodes feed. So that's exactly what we want to see. So let's check one other thing here. Check the sec profiling feed status, and we can see things look good. We have both feeds, they posted successfully, and great, that's exactly what we want to see. So let's go ahead and jump to SRX2, and then SRX3, and then configure the enforcement points. So that brings us to the end of the Configuring Adaptive Threat Profiling Part 1 Learning Byte. Please check out the Configuring Adaptive Threat Profiling Part 2 Learning Byte, where we will configure the enforcement points and see how this all works together. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.